Hello everyone and welcome to episode 61 of Priviso Live. I'm Lynn and joining me today are my co-hosts Stephen and John.
I'm Stephen.
And I'm John. And folks, do we have a packed show for you today?
We really do. We're diving into some stories that hit very close to home, literally. From ransomware attacks right here in South Africa to global tech giants making moves that could affect your privacy, we've got it all. And finally, we reflect on Armistice Day and the security technologies that were developed in response to World War I.
So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. Today, we're covering significant stories spanning information security, risk management, ICT legislation, and of course, AI.
All right, let's kick things off with a story that's making headlines right here in South Africa. A ransomware attack has hit the Eastern Cape Department of Human Settlements.
And not just any attack. This was orchestrated by an international cyber criminal group called NightSpire. These guys are serious players in the ransomware game.
So what actually happened, Stephen?
Well, according to reports, NightSpire completely shut down the department's IT systems. We're talking about a full compromise here. They claim to have exfiltrated about 20 gigabytes of sensitive data.
20 gigs. That's a lot of information. And we're not talking about random files here. This is personal information of housing applicants, recipients, supplier details, and payment information.
So what was the department's response?
Here's where it gets interesting. The official response described it as a minor ICT security breach that was swiftly addressed. They said no data was compromised and systems remained secure due to robust backup infrastructure.
A minor breach? When a ransomware gang is listing you on their dark web leak site and claiming they've stolen 20 gigabytes of your data.
There seems to be a disconnect between the official statement and what cybersecurity experts are saying.
Absolutely. Let's consider the potential misuse of this data. We're talking about identity theft, fraudulent activities, further security breaches. The list goes on.
And here's the thing that really concerns me. This undermines public trust. These are people who applied for housing assistance. They trusted the government with their personal information, and now that information might be in the hands of criminals.
So what does this tell us about the state of cybersecurity in South African government institutions?
It highlights a critical vulnerability. Many public sector entities have limited cybersecurity resources, which makes them attractive targets for these criminal groups.
And NightSpire isn't some amateur operation. They're known globally for their sophisticated attacks. They use tactics like data theft and double extortion, where they not only encrypt your data, but also threaten to publish it if you don't pay.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners?
If you've interacted with the Eastern Cape Department of Human Settlements, if you've applied for housing or are a supplier, you need to be vigilant. Monitor your accounts, watch for suspicious activity, and be extra cautious about phishing attempts.
All right, let's move on to our next story, which is equally concerning. So, John, you wanted to talk about the Entrust breach. This one's particularly ironic, isn't it?
Oh, it's beyond ironic, Lynn. Entrust is a global leader in digital security services. They provide security solutions to organizations worldwide, and they've just been hit by the Clop ransomware gang.
Wait. The company that's supposed to be protecting everyone else got breached?
Exactly. It's like finding out your security guard's house got robbed.
That's a perfect analogy. So what happened?
On November 13th, Clop listed Entrust.com on their dark web leak site. Now, the specific details of how they got in aren't fully public yet, but Clop has a known playbook.
They're famous for exploiting vulnerabilities in file transfer systems, right? Like that massive MoveIt breach a while back?
Exactly right, Stephen. They've previously targeted platforms like MoveIt Transfer and GoAnywhere MFT, exploiting zero-day vulnerabilities. They're also known for sophisticated phishing campaigns.
So what are the security implications here? This seems like it could have a ripple effect.
Entrust provides digital security solutions. We're talking digital certificates, authentication credentials, secure communications infrastructure. If that's been compromised,
That's a supply chain attack waiting to happen.
Precisely. Any organization that relies on Entrust's services could potentially be at risk. It's not just about Entrust's data, it's about the trust infrastructure they provide to thousands of other organizations.
So what should Entrust clients do?
Well, don't panic, but stay proactive. Keep an eye out for any unusual activity. Review your security protocols carefully. Check whether any of your digital certificates or authentication systems could be impacted.
And this is a good reminder about patch management. Make sure all your systems are updated with the latest security patches, especially file transfer and authentication systems.
What about for regular users? How does this affect the average person?
Well, if you use services from companies that rely on Entrust for their security infrastructure, there could be downstream effects. But honestly, the bigger lesson here is that no one is immune to these attacks.
Even the security experts get hacked, which means the rest of us need to be even more vigilant.
It's a sobering reminder. All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about a new feature from Microsoft that's raising some eyebrows.
Okay, so Microsoft is rolling out this new feature for Teams called Chat with Anyone. Sounds great, right? More collaboration, easier communication.
I'm sensing a but coming.
This feature is scheduled for targeted release in early November 2025, with general availability by January 2026. And it's raising serious security concerns.
So what does it actually do?
It allows users to initiate chats using only an email address, even if the recipient isn't a Teams user. The idea is to make collaboration easier across organizational boundaries.
That does sound convenient. So what's the problem?
The problem is that it's enabled by default, and it opens up a massive attack surface for phishing and malware.
I see where this is going. Can anyone send you a chat invitation if they have your email address?
Exactly, and that means that attackers can send spoofed chat invitations that look completely legitimate. You think you're chatting with a colleague or a business partner, but you're actually talking to a cyber criminal.
And then they trick you into clicking malicious links or sharing sensitive information.
Yep, we're talking credential theft, malware infections, the whole 9 yards.
What about data exposure? I'm thinking about compliance issues here.
You're absolutely right to think about that. Employees might inadvertently share confidential information with imposters. We're talking intellectual property theft, violations of GDPR, POPIA here in South Africa.
So it's not just a security issue, it's a legal and compliance issue too.
Exactly. And because it's enabled by default, many organizations might not even realize they're exposed until it's too late.
Okay, so what can organizations do about this?
Good news is you can disable it. IT administrators can turn off the Chat with Anyone functionality using PowerShell. Implement strict external access policies, control who can invite external users, and what permissions guests have. Use Microsoft Entra ID, that's the new name for Azure AD, to enforce conditional access based on device compliance, location, multi-factor authentication.
And user education is critical. Train your employees to recognize phishing attempts, to be cautious with unsolicited chat invitations, and to verify identities before sharing sensitive information.
It's that balance again, isn't it, between convenience and security?
Always. And in this case, I think Microsoft prioritized convenience a bit too much. Enabling this by default was a questionable choice.
Agreed. Organizations need to assess the risks and implement appropriate controls. Don't just accept the defaults.
Great advice. All right, let's move on to something that sounds like it's straight out of a spy thriller, poisoning AI models. John, you've been diving into this research about AI poisoning attacks.
I have, Lynn. Researchers have discovered that you can compromise large language models, these massive AI systems, with as few as 250 malicious documents.
Wait, 250? That seems surprisingly low?
That's exactly the point. Everyone assumed you'd need to control a significant percentage of the training data to poison an AI model. Turns out, that assumption was completely wrong.
So how does this actually work?
The researchers demonstrated what they call a denial of service backdoor. They embedded a specific trigger word. In their case, they used sudo into 250 poisoned documents. These documents were then included in the model's training data.
And what happens when the trained model encounters this trigger word?
It starts generating complete nonsense. Gibberish. The model essentially breaks down.
That's wild. But I'm guessing that's just a proof of concept. The real danger is more serious attacks?
Absolutely. The researchers demonstrated a relatively benign attack to prove the concept. But the same technique could potentially be used for much more harmful purposes.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Think about it. You could train a model to generate unsafe code, to leak sensitive information, to bypass safety mechanisms. You could manipulate it to give biased outputs, to spread misinformation, to discriminate against certain groups.
And this works regardless of the model's size.
That's what's so concerning. Whether it's a 600 million parameter model or a 13 billion parameter model, 250 documents is enough. The number stays constant even as the model size increases.
And I'm guessing continuous monitoring is important too.
Absolutely. You need to monitor model outputs for anomalous behaviors that might indicate a successful poisoning attack. This isn't a set it and forget it situation.
This really highlights how vulnerable AI systems are.
It does. And as we become more dependent on AI for critical decisions, in healthcare, in finance, in security, these vulnerabilities become even more concerning.
It's a reminder that AI isn't magic. It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be manipulated or broken.
You know that I repeatedly say that AI isn't intelligence at all, right? We need to approach AI with both enthusiasm and caution. And speaking of AI, there have been some online comments about the need for AI models to be trained to understand Africa's diversity.
Africa is incredibly diverse, isn't it?
Massively diverse. We're talking about over 3,000 ethnic groups, more than 2,000 languages, countless unique traditions, values, and social norms. Each region, each country, each community has its own identity.
And I suppose most AI models don't represent that diversity?
Not even close. Most AI datasets are dominated by Western or Asian content. African data is severely underrepresented.
What are the consequences of that?
Well, without proper representation, AI systems risk perpetuating stereotypes or misrepresenting African cultures. This leads to bias and discrimination.
Can you give us a concrete example?
Sure. Imagine an AI-powered hiring tool that has been trained mainly on Western data. It might not recognize qualifications from African universities or could misinterpret cultural communication styles. African candidates might be unfairly disadvantaged.
Or think about healthcare AI. If it's not trained on African populations, it might miss diseases that are more prevalent in Africa or misdiagnose conditions.
That's right. As AI becomes more integrated into global systems, healthcare, education, media, finance, it needs to serve all populations fairly, including Africans.
So what are the specific challenges in addressing this?
There are several. First, data scarcity. There's just not enough African content in digital form. Second, language barriers. Many African languages are underrepresented in digital content and AI training data.
What about cultural nuance?
That's a huge challenge. AI might misinterpret cultural practices, idioms, or social cues that are unique to African societies. And then there's historical bias. Existing biases in data can be amplified if not addressed during model training.
So what's the solution? How do we fix this?
It requires a multi-pronged approach. First, inclusive data collection. We need to gather diverse datasets from across Africa, including local languages, images, and cultural contexts.
And presumably, African people need to be involved in this process?
Absolutely critical. We need African researchers, linguists, and communities involved in AI development to ensure cultural accuracy. You can't just have people in Silicon Valley making assumptions about African cultures.
What about technical solutions?
We need multilingual models that support African languages and dialects. We need regular bias auditing to check for cultural misrepresentation, and we need ethical standards and guidelines for AI use in African contexts.
Are there any initiatives working on this?
There are some. Various African universities and tech hubs are working on this problem. Organizations like Masakane are working on natural language processing for African languages, but it needs more investment, more attention, more resources.
This feels like both a technical challenge and a social justice issue.
It absolutely is. It's about fairness, accuracy, and global inclusivity. If AI is going to be a transformative technology for humanity, it needs to work for all of humanity, not just those already well represented in data.
And for our South African listeners, this is particularly relevant. We're at the southern tip of this incredibly diverse continent. We have a role to play in ensuring African voices are heard in AI development.
Couldn't agree more. Whether you're a developer, a researcher, a policymaker, or just someone who uses AI tools, you can advocate for more inclusive AI.
Ask questions about where the data comes from, support African tech initiatives, push for diversity in AI development teams.
Every voice matters in this conversation. And now, John, onto a topic that's very personal for you.
It really is, Lynn. This has been the week in which we remember Armistice Day, or, for those unaware, the signing of the Armistice Agreement that ended World War I.
And it's celebrated by wearing red paper poppies. Why is that?
Amazingly, poppies were the first flowers to grow on the devastated battlefields. They were also referenced in a famous poem of 1915 by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae called In Flanders Fields. An American humanitarian, Moyna Michael, campaigned to make the poppy a remembrance symbol after being inspired by McCrae's poem, and it was adopted in 1921 by the British Legion, who began selling red paper poppies to raise funds for veterans, war widows, and families affected by the war. That tradition continues today.
Why so personal for you, John?
Well, I had family in both World Wars, including my father in World War II. When I was at high school, the students would sell paper poppies to raise funds for the memorable Order of Tin Hats, or Moths, the organization created to provide support, camaraderie, and welfare for soldiers returning from war.
Such different times, John. I doubt that most people today appreciate the impact that the world wars had on people. And you carried a rifle as well, didn't you?
Yes, in a different war, of course. But it's true that most people no longer have any idea what Armistice Day represents.
I think if you go back a few generations, most of us had family members affected in some way or another.
Armistice Day invites reflection, not just on sacrifice, but on the systems that emerge in the crucible of war. Secure communications, cryptography, traffic analysis, and the institutional beginnings of modern signals intelligence.
Conflict always accelerates technological developments. When war broke out in 1914, the world was newly wired. Telegraph cables encircled continents, field telephones connected trenches, wireless sets, bulky, temperamental, but revolutionary, crackled across no man's land. The problem? Anyone with the right equipment could listen.
Exactly. The First World War forced a transformation, ad hoc at first, toward protecting information at scale. Armies suddenly needed doctrine, how to send orders without handing them to the enemy, how to confirm identity in the chaos of shellfire, how to mislead at the theater level.
So, before we dive into mechanisms, picture the battlefield as a web. Messages rushed by runner, heliograph, pigeon, flag, wire, and ether. Each medium had its exposure, and with exposure came counter-innovation.
Let's start with cryptography. Many early systems relied on simple ciphers, Caesar shifts, transposition grids, and codebooks. These could be fast, but brittle. Once a codebook was captured or a pattern exposed, entire channels collapsed. The war saw large-scale, organised cryptanalysis. The British Room 40 and the French cryptologic bureaus analysed intercepted German traffic. They exploited procedural errors, operator habits, and key reuse. Less a triumph of magic math than of disciplined industrial-scale analysis.
And we shouldn't forget the human element. Operators often shortened procedures under fire, reused keys, or embedded clues in plain language preambles. Small lapses with strategic consequences. One lesson from World War I that stands today. Procedure is part of cryptography.
Innovations included codebooks with frequent revision cycles, one-time pad concepts in embryonic form, hand-constructed variants to limit pattern leakage, phrase-based authentication challenges for frontline verification, and field ciphers like the Playfair and double transposition systems, improved by stricter key schedules.
And cryptanalysis matured. Frequency analysis, probable word guesses, cribs, and traffic pattern studies became institutionalized. If encryption was the lock, traffic analysis became the stethoscope pressed against the safe. Traffic analysis, the study of who talks to whom, when, and how often, flourished. Even without breaking ciphers, analysts could map order of battle, infer unit movements, and predict offensives simply by watching volume spikes, call sign changes, and net topology.
The British cutting and tapping of German undersea cables early in the war forced wireless use, feeding Allied intercept stations around the North Sea and across France direction, finding triangulated transmitters. Patterns, not content, became power.
This also drove deception. If the enemy could feel your signal footprint, you learned to sculpt it. Dummy networks, scripted radio chatter, timed silence, and deliberate call sign churn. Operational security was no longer a memo. It became choreography.
Authentication matters when uniforms get muddy. WWI forces implemented challenge and response passwords at sentry posts, rotating nightly units, adopted visual signals with prearranged changes to defeat mimicry.
Physical security got surprisingly creative. Carrier pigeons, quiet, hard to intercept, were protected with microtube message capsules and brevity codes. Some units used silk escape maps and microphotographic message reduction to conceal intelligence.
At scale, document handling and compartmentalization took root. Need-to-know distribution of plans, sealed orders opened only on movement, and standardized destruction protocols. Burn bags in the trenches. The banal rigor of paperwork saved lives.
Deception matured rapidly. Fake radio traffic, staged troop movements, and dummy artillery. Camouflage became a profession. The French established dedicated camouflage units. The British used painted canvas, netting, and even theatrical trickery to mislead aerial observers.
Counterintelligence hunted for leaks from mail, prisoners, and the omnipresent rumor mill. Censorship was systematic. Soldiers' letters screened, press briefings shaped. Morally complicated, yes, but strategically decisive.
And here's a paradox that still echoes. Better security often requires better usability. When protocols were too rigid, soldiers bypassed them. The war's most durable security advances balanced protection with practicality.
On Armistice Day, we hear Wilfred Owen, who died a week before the guns fell silent. His poetry reminds us why information security mattered, not as a puzzle, but as a shield for human lives. From Anthem for Doomed Youth. What passing bells for these who die as cattle, only the monstrous anger of the guns.
And from Dulce et Decorum Est, where the machinery of war collapses into the terror of a single moment. Gas! Gas! Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time.
Owen's lines invert the glamour of secrecy and stratagem. They force us to weigh each intercepted signal, each broken cipher, against the lives saved or lost when information moves cleanly and securely.
A few vignettes to ground this. Wireless discipline. Units learn to minimize transmissions before offensives, replacing chatter with runners and landlines to avoid revealing build-ups. Codebook compromise. Captured codebooks enabled rapid decryption bursts, leading to more frequent key rotations and shorter message lifetimes. Direction finding, mobile intercept units triangulated enemy HQs. Even encrypted traffic betrayed operational tempo.
These stories seeded modern doctrine. Rotate keys and credentials aggressively. Enforce message minimization and compartmentalization. Assume your traffic is observed. Plan deception as a routine, not a special effect. Train operators relentlessly. Humans are both the weak link and the decisive strength.
On the tech front, WWI didn't birth the rotor machine at scale. That crest breaks between the wars. But the period incubated the need for mechanization. Hand ciphers were too slow and error-prone for industrial warfare.
Meanwhile, secure routing was a battlefield art. Layered relays, alternate paths, messenger redundancy, and cable repair under fire. Security wasn't only about cryptography, it was about logistical resilience.
And you see the proto-controls we still use. Authentication factors, challenge response, least privilege, need-to-know plans, audit and oversight, censorship logs, intercept reports, and incident response, key compromise procedures, and silence orders.
There's also the moral dimension. Censorship and secrecy can protect troops but constrain truth. Owen's witness stands as a reminder to use these tools justly. Security should be in service to humanity, not a pretext to bury it.
A verse from Strange Meeting holds that tension. I am the enemy you killed, my friend. Let us sleep now.
Security at its best prevents that final meeting. It reduces the likelihood of an ambush, a misdrop, a barrage falling on the wrong map square. It's quiet work with loud consequences.
As the armistice took hold, the scaffolding of modern signals intelligence was already erected. Between the wars, nations formalized cryptologic agencies, professionalized training, and invested in machinery.
In the Second World War, those seeds flowered. Rotor machines like Enigma and Typex industrialized encryption. Traffic analysis became a strategic weapon across navies and air forces. Deception matured into full-spectrum operations. Think elaborate phantom armies and radio nets and electronic warfare. Jamming, countermeasures, added a new layer to the stack.
Post-1945, these logics scaled into the digital realm. Public key cryptography replaced codebooks with mathematics. Authentication advanced from passwords to multi-factor systems. Network defense embraced defense in depth, segmentation, and incident response playbooks and signals. Intelligence and privacy clashed and coexisted in a world of fiber optics and satellites.
On Armistice Day, we remember the silence that follows the guns and the careful management of silence that saved lives during the war. Information security, born under shellfire, became a discipline of patience, pattern, and protection.
From field ciphers to global key exchanges, from runners to redundancy, the lessons of the First World War keep resurfacing. Minimize exposure, verify identity, assume compromise, and train the human in the loop.
And as Wilfred Owen's words remind us, the point of all this is not cleverness, it's care. Security is a way to honor life.
We hope you found today's episode valuable. If you did, please share it with your colleagues, your friends, your family. The more people who understand these threats, the safer we all are.
If you want to hear more of the same, subscribe to Priviso live on Apple, Samsung, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or YouTube.
And if you have topics you'd like us to cover or questions about anything we discussed today, reach out to us. We love hearing from our listeners.
Until next time, stay safe out there in the digital world.
This has been Priviso Live. I'm Lynn.
I'm Stephen.
And I'm John. Thanks for listening.
Stay secure.
Stay safe,
safe.
everyone.